Hi everyone, welcome to Here We Are, Brattleboro's community talk show. I'm Wendy O'Connell, and my guest today is Deborah Luskin. Probably a lot of you know Deborah from around town and the many things that she's done. And when it comes to writing, Deborah's just covered almost all the bases. She's an author, an educator, an editorial columnist, and she's lectured widely and taught countless workshops. She facilitates the ongoing Rosefire Writing Circle. Deborah's also led programs for the Vermont Humanities Council, and she's been a commentator on VPR, which we now know as Vermont Public. As a local citizen, Deborah served as the Town Moderator in Newfane, and she was a trained volunteer at the Brattleboro Community Justice Center. Her new book, Reviving Artemis, The Making of a Huntress, is a memoir, and it's hot off the press, and it's going to be on the shelves very soon. Welcome, Deborah.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me here, Wendy. It's great.
Yeah, it's
great
fun.
to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to see you as well. Our paths have crossed in libraries and bookstores and various places around town.
Yeah.
Well, when you've been here 35 or 45 years, that's apt to happen. You did not grow up here, but you visited here a lot. You grew up in New York City. Well, you grew up in a bunch of places, including New York City.
Yeah, New York City was the city.
Yeah.
I grew up in Teaneck, New Jersey until I was 10 years old, and then my family moved to Fairfield County, Connecticut, to Weston, Connecticut. But in 1965, when I was 9 years old, I came to Newfane for the first time. And I came every summer after that.
Oh. That Vermont connection was through your family. You did have some relatives here.
Right. They were summer people, but they were early summer people.
Yes.
1964 was when they bought the small little house. Yeah. And it was just magical to come here for the summer. And my cousin, who grew up there in the summers, but otherwise lived in Brooklyn, is a naturalist over in the Harris Center for Conservation Education. So both of us have gone rogue.
Well, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. That you've both ended up in a rural area after having a very urban upbringing.
I lived in Manhattan as an adult, or a young adult, and when it was time to get out of the city for the summer, because I could not stand another summer in New York, I broke down and bought a car and moved to Newfane and lived in my aunt and uncle's house until I could find a place of my own.
Wow.
I found in a little cabin, a little house that was smaller than my New York apartment. And it was wonderful. I decided it was so good I was going to keep it and just come up on weekends and write my dissertation there. And I arranged to commute back. Things got complicated. I met a man. I married him.
that always makes things complicated.
Right. I just stayed.
Yeah.
And I finished my dissertation in Vermont. I mean, I was at Columbia, but I wrote it here. And then I became an office manager of a family medical practice. The obvious career track.
Career track, yes, absolutely. Well, that was because your husband was a doctor.
And so he still is. He's still practicing medicine.
That's
Tim
right.
Schaefer is still practicing medicine at Grace Cottage,
Yes.
Vermont's smallest hospital.
Yeah, I know, and we love that about it, yeah. And you described it as having a mom and pop doc shop.
Those were the 16 years that I was running the private practice.
Yeah. You certainly have a relationship with rural life. And your first book, your first novel, I believe, is all about the old Vermonters, the old timers, and the newcomers. And I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit, because I've been reading it. And so it's very fresh in my mind. And I think that this is one thing that, Howard Frank Mosher has, Castle Freeman, many Vermont writers have talked about, the old timers here. But if you could talk a little bit about the contrapuntalness, of the old and the new.
Well, you were talking about Into the Wilderness.
Into the Wilderness, yes.
Which is going to be reissued in April this year, which is very exciting.
Yeah.
Because it's been out of print for a while. It was the Vermont Library Association acknowledged Into the Wilderness for its sense of place. It's about this twice widowed New York Jewish woman who comes to Vermont against her will and is adamant that she'll never marry again. And she runs into the extension agent who's about to retire, who's always voted Republican, and has never left the state. And they don't like each other until they meet at the Marlboro Music Festival, which was at that time this real unusual place for Vermont with people speaking foreign languages. But I said it in 1964, which is when Vermont underwent reapportionment on threat of having the Supreme Court tell them they had to.
You actually have created a rural life. You have had chickens, and you have had planted gardens, and you have had animals, and so you really dove into the rural life of Vermont in a very small town where there were a lot of, in the 60s, well, and you came in 84, but there was still a lot of old timers. You know, and as you said, we're the old timers now,
right?
But in a different way, because we weren't born here.
I can remember some of the old timers like Mert Coleman, who had heifers every summer. And actually, when I came as a child, he had milking cows. He had 4 cows, and he only had them in the summer. And we would buy milk and with the cream on it, and oh gosh, that was good.
Yes,
you know, and I can't even explain why I was so drawn to country life, except that I've written and studied 18th and 19th century British fiction, and you know, it's only recently that the whole world, it's really since World War II that everybody's moved to either the suburbs or the cities, when the suburbs have just expanded. But it was common even after World War II in Vermont, but it was common for people to have some chickens and raise a pig, which I've done, and slaughter a pig, which I've done.
Yes.
And there's something also so grounding, literally and metaphorically, about gardening. There's nothing better than sitting in a row of tomato plants, weeding them,
and talking to them as well.
And Living in Place is the name of my blog that I started in 2014. And it lapsed a little bit as I was working on the hunting book, but it's now moved to Substack, still called Living in Place. And that's where I wrote about not being able to buy underwear in Brattleboro. Yeah, right. And so, you know, telling stories to create change, because we're a narrative species. Humans tell stories. I'm beginning to learn that other animals also tell stories, but I don't know what they are.
Yeah, right.
And even plants talk to each other. They communicate. So, but humans depend on stories, and hunting stories are probably among the oldest stories humans have ever told.
Right. One thing that you said somewhere, that you create a world out of language. And what were your early influences in that? Were you a big reader? Were there things that you really loved to read?
Well, I love to read. I grew up reading Louisa May Alcott, Heidi, The Secret Garden, and then I moved on to Jane Austen, and I've not really gotten past that.
Yeah.
That's what my PhD is, in Jane Austen's work.
Oh, yeah.
And the current book has a lot of Jane Austen in it. But 19th century novels, I read, you know, I love Thomas Hardy, and he is writing, so it's a combination of rural life, but also rural life coming up against technological advances. So in Thomas Hardy, in Tess, there's this famous scene of the threshing machine that the characters are dealing with. In my first book, it's the bulk tank. I mean, it's not a sexy thing, but it changed farming in Vermont, and dairy farming. And here we are now dealing with technology, the information highway. So even the interstate was a big technological advance in Vermont. And then, you know, being the old timers, I'm sure you can remember, you used to be able to, either you had a party line, which my aunt and uncle did have, and then you moved to just 5 digits to make a phone call, and then it was 10 digits, but you still had to talk to the Operator.
We had a little running contest of who can remember where the telephone booth was in downtown Brattleboro.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
well, I'm going to leave that for the audience. Actually, you can talk among yourselves and try to figure that one out. So all of those early influences obviously have gone into not only all your writing, but all the things that you've done. How did you come to be more in the public with your writing, doing workshops and educating and doing columns for the different newspapers in town?
I got a PhD because I thought I was going to teach in a college and then write on the side.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And I didn't think I would ever get married. And I never thought about having kids. I thought maybe I'd get married to somebody who had kids already, eventually. I didn't think it through. I was absolutely outraged by motherhood, that people said, oh, it's the most wonderful thing to have a child, until you were pregnant, or I was pregnant, and then they say, oh, put money in the bank now. Or not money, put sleep in the bank now.
Yeah.
Enjoy a hot meal while you can. And I didn't have family around. So I was, and Tim, my husband, was just working all the time. I was at home with this child. I turned the radio on just to hear another adult in the course of the day. And that was, I just thought, you know, this isn't easy. And I should warn other women before they do this.
Right.
And so that's how I started.
Yeah.
And this organization that sponsored Family Matters was the name of it. And when eventually that ended, and Stephen Fay kept me on. And I was writing some more political things, but I was always telling short stories. And then I really wanted to be on VPR. And during the 50th anniversary of Edward R. Murrow's This I Believe, I had submitted one, and it went to national, and they had so many that they sent the ones that they thought were worthy but couldn't do back to the affiliate. And so I was called back.
Oh, interesting.
And then I was said, well, you come back, submit another one.
Yeah.
And then I started doing 2 a month.
So these are the commentaries.
The commentaries for the radio.
Boy, I am so sorry they've stopped doing that.
They stopped shortly after I left.
It was
a
great
wonderful thing.
And you got to know the people, the commentators, and the stories, and they were always wonderful, just little pieces, of Vermont life. They were really fabulous.
Yeah, and radio, I adore radio, because writing is all about voice.
Right.
And that was just pure voice.
Yeah. In the course of these years, you've also worked on a blog.
Yes.
Are you still doing that, or you haven't transferred over completely to Substack?
No, the blog is on Substack.
You've talked about Middle Ages, which I think is a great line, and also the Long Trail. Of you doing the Long Trail at some point.
Well, I did the Long Trail twice.
Did you?
The first time, Tim and I started it together, and over 30 years. We have finished it, although we actually haven't done the last section together. We've done it separately. But then in 2016, the year I turned 60, and this dear friend of mine, Jan Rutherdale, who was 5 days younger than me, we hiked it together in 25 days with Tim as our mule, bringing us new clothes, fresh clothes, laundering our clothes. We had 2 sets. He'd launder our clothes, bring them to us. He'd bring us fresh coffee, 1 cup of fresh coffee, and something baked. And we had set all our food out in boxes. This is our first resupply, second. And he'd bring us that, including some chocolate and bourbon, and that's what got us through.
Got you through, right.
Yeah, it was the trip of a lifetime. It was really great.
You talking about turning 60 is when things really started. There was a real change that happened.
My next birthday will be 70.
Yeah.
So it's, there's some things, as with the parenting, there are a few things I want to set straight. People talk about menopause as being the swamp, or aging as just this horrific thing. And I have a very different attitude about both of them. And I feel as if aging, at least as this point in my life, is fantastic. It's freedom. There's a kind of freedom. My kids are grown. I'm happily married, so I'm not dating and mating anymore. It's a great relief. And I have companionship. I have health. I'm privileged to have enough, I own my house with no mortgage. And, and I have some money other than the Social Security I'm going to start collecting.
Yes, yeah.
So this is just a great time.
Yes, right.
And my kids are all launched. I have a couple of grandkids. I'm hoping for more, but out of my control.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Having spent so much time in the woods and being a rural person, you went through something about being afraid of getting lost in the woods, right?
That goes back to maybe I was 5 or 7 in the back of a 1956 Chevy with my family. We made a wrong turn, ended up in a dark wood. My father got angry at my mother because she was supposed to be navigating. I started crying. One of my brothers kicked me and called me a crybaby. And I felt my mother's humiliation and then my humiliation. And I thought we were going to drown, in either because we were lost in the dark woods or because of my tears. I don't know. It was just this really memorable moment. And when I was 16, I did Outward Bound in the boundary waters of Minnesota, 28 days, including a 3-day solo. One time the group had to navigate our way back to camp through swamps. And for that brief moment, I knew how to use a compass and map. And I've been taught that any number of times. I had no confidence of it. And I was trying to learn how to read the landscape as if it were a book. And I'd go out in the woods with a tree identification book, and it's like, there's no correlation. It's not, or maybe it's me, and maybe it's being female and relational. I see things in relation, which is a much better way to learn about the woods. So but when I did the long trail, I already knew. I was already preparing or procrastinating about preparing to hunt. So I wanted to learn how to first go through the woods without being on a worn path. And that's a metaphor for life. At 60, I'd done all the things. I checked them all off, education, marriage, children, supporting my family. I'd done those things. I now wanted to just do something different. And I wanted to overcome my fear of being scared of the woods, of not being forest literate. And I was in my garden, looked over the fence. I had fenced out the wilderness. And it was like it came from the universe. It said, learn from the deer. And I thought, they know how to do this.
Right.
And I had met, when I first moved to Vermont, I had met Roger Brown from Townsend, Vermont. He came with our house. That we bought an old house, and he was the man who had kept it together for the previous owners, and we hired him to keep it together for us. And we did some renovations, so we had electricity upstairs. Little things.
That's good.
Roger and I were so suspect of each other to begin with. He's a born and bred Townsend Vermonter. And but I learned about hunting from him, and then I learned that my friend Helen was a hunter, and she said she'd take me, and I brought a camera, and she had a rifle, and I'm sitting in this cold woods, and she's telling me the buck is going to come out of that hemlock hedge any moment, and I'm thinking, I just want to go home. I am cold and bored. And so that took care of that for about almost 30 years.
Wow.
And then I had this moment in the garden, and I realized if I learn how to hunt, I will learn how to read the landscape. the next hurdle, and an even bigger one, was learning how to use a firearm.
Yeah.
I had never held a gun in my life. I have strong feelings. I still have strong feelings about gun safety and a need for some checks on who can own guns and what the responsibility is, and that no military weapons should be in civilian hands. And I'm also, I feel like an anomaly, this very liberal person who owns a rifle.
Right, right.
And has used it.
Yeah.
I've shot 2 deer.
Yeah.
And so that was a big hurdle. And I thought, well, maybe I'll just be such a bad shot. This will be ridiculous. And it turned out I'm a very good shot.
You're a very good shot. Wow, wow. This is where your new book comes in. And I think that one of the things that really struck me, and you wrote this in regard to the book, was I was no longer tugged by the moon. I was now in tune with the sun. Being unmoored from the tides of fertility was profound. This annual rhythm is slower than the lunar tide that once ruled me. The solar rhythm allows me a deeper experience of the seasons and a longer view, both backwards into the lived past and forward toward death. So that's part of what Reviving Artemis is.
Oh, Reviving Artemis is about so much. The through line is my learning to hunt.
Yeah.
But it's also a memoir of the first time I ever foraged for food, and that was with my family in eastern Long Island, where we went clamming and fishing, and that's what we ate that night. And if we didn't get anything, we ate hamburgers and hot dogs. And then so there's a lot about food. I could just go off on a food tangent, but also about being a woman. I grew up female with 3 brothers, and in the 50s and 60s, I don't think I was unusual in believing that, boy, it would have been better to be a boy than a girl. And then the 70s and the second wave of feminism came along, and I thought, oh, hell, I'm going to go do that. And then after that, it was like, just a minute, I don't want to be the CEO of a company. I don't want to be, I don't want to be a man.
Yeah, right.
So there's this new way of being, and that's where Artemis comes in. Artemis, who we know as the goddess of the hunt, childbirth, and wildlife, was known as the mother goddess in pre-Hellenic times. There was a temple to her at Ephesus, which is now in Turkey. It was a site of pilgrimage men and women went to. It was rebuilt 3 times, and the 3rd time, it was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. It was sacked by the Goths. It's mentioned in the New Testament when it's being shoved out by Christianity. And I had written maybe 19 versions and 19 drafts of this book before I met Artemis. And when I started looking at, thinking about her, I thought of all these depictions of her in art, where she's young, slim, fleet. It's like, not me. And I had to think, how does she come into this?
Right.
And that's when I learned about Artemis of Ephesus. And I started reading those stories with a feminist slant, and which is, they were all, for 2,000 years, they were all translated by men.
Right.
And I don't read Greek, but I read translations, and I just took the stories and I applied them to what I was learning in the forest about hunting, about wanton killing, the story of the Caledonian bear, boar, it's a boar, and about Artemis turning, I don't remember her name, maybe it's Calypso, a friend of hers who her father Zeus has raped, and she turns her friend into a bear, and I thought, that seems like, that's a nasty thing to do. And then I rethought it and thought, no, she's protecting her friend. Zeus isn't going to touch a bear.
Interesting.
And going into the woods even in layers and layers of clothing and feeling like, people wouldn't even know I'm female, it still felt dangerous. It felt like I was trespassing on men's turf. Now, I need to say right out, every man who has helped me learn how to hunt or who I have met in the woods has been among the kindest men on the planet. But hunters have a really bad rep.
Yeah.
And it just takes one beer can left in the woods for that to happen.
Right. Yeah. So you had a lot of guides in a certain kind of way.
I did.
Not only the men who helped you, and
Right.
And probably there were a few women involved with that as well, but also Artemis.
Yeah.
As kind of a sidekick,
Right.
or
a guide, a reference, a guide.
Yep.
Stories.
Yes.
We
right.
learn from stories.
Right.
Humans learn from stories.
Right.
I learn from stories. And that's also in the woods. I see the story of the woods. That first you see the beech trees, and then you go up a little higher and you start to see the oak and the hemlock.
Right.
And so that's how I learned how to acquire woodland literacy.
Your world expanded tremendously during this time. But it's not to say that it didn't start out with you having an interest in all of this, and also planting yourself in this, as I said before, in a rural community. And so you were surrounded all the time by wildlife in different forms. But you, maybe it is the turning 60 thing, but taking it to another level. And I really like the way your titling, because for many of us in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, reviving Ophelia was a very big book for us in reference, I think, to our daughters, and for us looking back, but for us in, moving forward with our daughters. And so reviving Artemis is another archetype, another mythology that we can relate to in a different way. And you took it fully on.
Right.
So you were in the woods, you took down a buck at some point. You took it to the taxidermist, to Tom White.
Only the head to be boiled off. I was so in love with this buck that I couldn't bear. I could take its hide off.
Yourself.
I skinned it, with the help from my daughter Ruth, but then the head, I was going to bury it, and these guys, local friends, said that, no, the mice will eat it. I said, well, maybe I can hang it in the tree. He said, no, the birds will eat it, the squirrels will eat it. So then I gave in, and I brought it to Tom because he could boil it, and I just have the skull. I didn't want a stuffed head.
Yes. So when you say that you loved this buck, you created a relationship in the act of also ending its life. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, that's the end of the book, and I think I should save that.
Okay,
that would be a spoiler.
Okay.
But I want to talk about food.
Okay.
Because I have always been obsessed about growing my own food. And then starting in 1975, and read Diet for Small Planet. And then in the spring of 75, I met Ralph Nader. He came to Oberlin trying to find people to run Ohio Public Interest Group.
Yeah.
He was setting them up all over the country. And he talked about how food was, fresh produce was shrinking to the edges of the supermarket, and the interior aisles were being filled with processed and packaged food, and that our food, a typical meal, was traveling 1,500 miles. I think that's like an underestimate now. And then just yesterday in the New York Times Morning Letter was all about how processed food is making us sick. So we have always kept chickens, and we have eggs. We grow more than 50% of what we eat. We preserve it, we freeze it, we can it, we dry it, and we cook. I spend a lot of time cooking.
The kitchen.
Tim and I cook together now. He's actually taken over some of the cooking, which is such a treat to be cooked for. It's really great.
Yeah. Reviving Artemis, I think, will be really interesting in terms of, for all of us, being able to find ways to look at our fears and to also know what our personal limits are and finding our places in the natural world and our connection, not only our place, but our connection.
Part of the mess that we are in is because people have become disconnected from nature. And there are people who don't know where their food comes from, and everybody eats.
Everybody eats.
Everybody eats. Also knowing that everything has a trade-off. Some people are disgusted that I shoot a deer. That deer has a very low carbon footprint. Yeah. And you can be a vegan and have a very heavy carbon footprint. So, and I really have tried to lay it out for readers to decide.
Yes.
I admire people who don't eat meat, and but I would like to have less demand for meat raised in CAFOs, and that's really killing the environment in so many ways. Yeah.
Well, I think it's great that you're leaving it open like that, because of course we need to have more of that kind of openness in our discussions anyway.
Yes.
But also to look at really what is behind all of our opinions and all of the things that we have held onto for so long, to realize that there's a bigger picture. Yeah. And for that, I'm really grateful to you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much, Deborah. Thanks for being on the show today.
This has been just a pleasure to talk with you.
It was fun. It was really fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks to all of you for being with us today. And keep your eyes out for reviving Artemis, because that book is going to be around town in various bookstores. And Deb will also be doing different talks and book readings. So we all look forward to that, and we will see you next time.